evolution of wearable heart rate variability technology is something that I'm really excited about. I think it will positively impact all areas of healthcare and human performance. Imagine a future whereby we all have wearable technology constantly monitoring our health 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when we go and see the doctor, we can literally just plug in our data and they can potentially know if there's a problem, if there's not a problem, very quickly without having to go through the rigmarole of old-fashioned diagnostics. The technology to monitor heart rate variability is already available in products like Fitbits, Apple Watches, Garmin's, etc. But the accuracy of the technology has always been quite questionable. In-step, Belfast-based startup, Be Secure, who are pushing the limits in terms of accurate data capture and really pushing the boundaries in terms of innovation in this space. I interviewed co-founder and CTO Aidan Corbett from his base in Belfast. They're a proud Northern Irish operation who have trebled in size over the last couple of years and have a big team in the US now and a really bright future ahead. Their technology is in some of the best products out there. We talk about cardiovascular disease being the most prevalent cause of death globally. We also discuss the hidden threat to heart health, including stress, overtraining, and so on. And also the importance of downtime and how Aidan ensures that their team take work-life balance very seriously. It's really a fascinating conversation and a real eye-opener, guys. I think you'll love this one. It's Aidan Corbett. Aidan, I've been so excited about interviewing you. Obviously, we've been talking for quite some time. I'm a big fan of Be Secure's tech. I'm a huge wearables guy, as you know. I currently own a Fitbit, but I've been looking at Whoop bands and stuff. I wanted to upgrade around Christmas, so maybe we can talk about that. But look, let's start with a question that I ask all of our guests to get going. What does good leadership mean to you, Aidan?
Yeah, I think leadership is a very interesting concept, but for me, leadership's really, it's all about the people that are around you and your team. And I always say you're only as good as your team. So how you work with people, the honesty, the transparency you have with them, the ability to put your hand up and say, I got this wrong or I made a mistake. I think, that sort of attitude or approach and, leave the ego at the door is really, really important because, people, I think leadership is not something that you can sell. It's something that exists and people have an opinion of it, and it either exists for those people or it doesn't. And so I think, sometimes people going out to be leaders or to try to be, the best leader they can be are almost trying to create something that maybe is not natural. And I think if you can be natural with the people around you and they tend to look on you as a leader, then it's there. What happens. It's a natural thing.
Yes, of course. Authenticity, I think, is
authenticity.
It's the most underrated facet of good leadership, isn't it? I think if people, believe you're being true to yourself and they believe in what you're saying, then that's pretty much the most of the battle is won. Then, isn't it? So
I think so, and everything after that is I'm not going to say easy, but if you're on a journey and you're doing something like we are in our company, and you surround yourself with people with great attitudes, good work ethics, anything can happen. Magic can happen.
I'm really looking forward to unpacking that journey because I think you've been on a big journey since we last spoke. So we'll come back to that. But I want to rewind back to the early days, Aidan. What did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a kid, I was fascinated by how things worked. And I used to sort of take stuff apart, some of my toys and some of my parents' things, and try to figure out how it worked, but then I would never put it back together properly. So I caused chaos everywhere. That sort of idea and fascination of, science and technology and how it comes together sort of stuck with me as I went through school. I wanted to create something or improve something, but also I was interested in potentially becoming a teacher. So it was engineering or teaching. And I now recognize as I'm a little bit older that the ability to create something, but also the ability to try and work with people actually goes hand in hand. So, there was crossover there. So I went on a path of getting into electronic and computer engineering as part of my degree course. Completed that, became an electronic engineer. Eventually then became a senior engineer, technical specialist, focusing on signal integrity and electromagnetics. But I always liked dealing with people, so I ended up getting into engineering management positions and then eventually to this role.
Fantastic. Okay. So tell us a little bit about Be Secure then. What problem are you trying to solve?
Well, Be Secure originally started life around a cybersecurity play as a next generation biometric security technology. So everybody's aware of fingerprint and facial recognition, and Be Secure stands for biometric security. So we actually started life in a very different place, and it was around the principle of ECGs being unique from person to person, which had come out of various different studies. So it was trying to create a technology around that. And we do have that technology. We have created that technology. But as we further progressed as a company, it was very, very clear that there's a massive problem around cardiovascular disease. In fact, it's the number one killer in the world. 18 million people die every year of cardiovascular disease, and 80% of it's preventable, according to the American Heart Association. So, we recognize that we created a technology for one purpose, but actually applied in a different way could really, really help in this fight against cardiovascular disease. And so we've added that capability to our technology, and we really now focus on that. That's where we're getting most demand for the technology.
I did not know that 80% of it was preventable. I just assumed the majority of it was hereditary, and
No.
obviously I knew you could influence it with good diet and lifestyle and things, but that's quite shocking. Is that sort of something? So was that the core driver then to come up with something? When you set up Biometric Secure, as it was called then? Be Secure sounds a lot cooler, by the way. Was that the biggest driver for you and your co-founders then?
No, I mean, it started with this novel new, cyber solution. That's how it all started. But when you unpick the challenges with trying to detect an ECG signal in the first place, it's an incredibly difficult signal to acquire, but it's full of incredible information. So, it was a recognition that we could do something very special. I also had a very close friend of mine pass away suddenly, very fit guy, about a year into the journey of Be Secure, a year and a half in. I couldn't help but think to myself, if he had been trying out our early prototypes or early demos, would we have seen something in that signal? And if we'd have seen something in that signal, could we have done something about it? And fundamentally, that's what's going on today, is that this is a reactive problem. When do we get an ECG taken or any form of medical measurements? Normally because something's already happened. And so the healthcare systems at the moment are reactive. They're not preventative.
Yeah, sure.
So our idea was, okay, let's build on this technology. Let's create something that's very scalable, very accurate. Let's license it to other technology companies because they can absolutely scale it, as opposed to a small company with one product in Northern Ireland. And that's what we're doing.
Being proactive, not reactive, I think is probably something which probably defines your product in terms of the healthcare side, isn't it? But obviously your technology is in wearables, so it's more for a sort of leisure and more of a nice to have than a need to have as well, isn't it? So you got that facet to your business. Is that right? Do you want to talk us through the strategy a little bit, Adrian?
If you focus on the ability to acquire the signal in the first place, the ability to derive all the really incredible information that's in there, and it's not just information that's related to if you have a heart condition or not. There's information about your lifestyle, how you sleep, how stressed you are, incredible information about the body and mind within that signal. So we focused on the capability to actually acquire the signal in the first place, do it very accurately, get the associated accreditations and qualifications around that, for example, our FDA clearance, and then have something that other technology companies could very easily integrate into their technology. That was sort of the first aspect of the strategy that we've done, and we're on that journey now. And it's not just wearable customers. So we are privy to a lot of different things that are happening out there, and there's many more types of technologies that are coming with the biosensing capabilities. And ultimately, if people are interacting with various types of devices, and those devices have the ability to, give early indications back to those people, then you can, you can't see it. You can't fix a problem you can't see.
Yeah.
For example, we all talk about being stressed. Well, if you were to take your car and you were to rev the engine in first gear, the engine won't be destroyed straight away, but eventually it will be.
Yeah.
So, a feature like that, which is not a formal diagnostic feature, is actually an incredibly important feature to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. So, we could be in a situation in the future, do you think, whereby heart rate variability is seen as basically a baseline sort of data point that a doctor will get your wearable, put it into the sort of laptop when you're there having your checkup. And the data coming out of that will essentially be the center point of the conversation. Oh, do you know what I mean? It's like you would build your treatment plan around what that data is telling you and stuff like that. Is that where you think it's going in terms of clinical usage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an incredible parameter, and we have a very accurate set of heart rate variability measurements and capabilities, and you absolutely see changes in that heart rate variability depending on what's going on in your life.
Yeah.
You'll see changes based on a good night's sleep. You'll see changes based on the effects of alcohol. So it's a really interesting parameter to keep an eye on. And there are studies now that are starting to come out, very large scale studies that relate, your heart rate variability levels to all-cause mortality. More and more data like this is going to be generated and is being generated by devices. The issue for the medical community is that's a huge amount of extra data on top of all the problems that they already have.
Yeah, sure.
So it's really important that technology companies like ourselves are able to actually provide the contextual information of what's happening, not just generally give you a measurement, but what does this actually mean?
Yeah.
How does it translate to something? Does it help a clinician make a decision easier without forcing them to have to do more analysis?
So just to talk about HRV, heart rate variability, because not many people will know too much about this. So just correct me if I'm wrong. If you've got high HRV, then that's a good thing, I think, isn't it? If you've got low heart rate variability, then there's potentially a problem. Is that typically, in a very simplistic terms, that's how it works, isn't it?
Yeah, the higher the heart rate variability, the better. Heart rate variability, so your heart has a natural variation from beat to beat, and the heart is part of the autonomous nervous system. And if you've ever heard the term fight or flight,
sure.
Sometimes we're in a really restful state. It could be sleep, it could be taking an hour's rest lying on the sofa. Your body's effectively and your mind is recovering and resting. And then sometimes we're all go. It might be work, at meetings, actually exercise as well. But ultimately, you want to have a form of sort of stasis where you're getting a nice balance of each. So whenever we're doing something that's nervous, it may be presenting a job interview. We effectively go into that fight mode where all our systems effectively react faster. Our heart can sometimes beat faster. The variability goes down. We become effectively like a robot executing on what we need to do. So your heart now goes into a very sort of fixed state of beat to beat, and because you're in this sort of this sympathetically dominant state, because you're in a sort of a nervous environment or you're excited or whatever it is, but you're geared up, you're ready. And then when you're in a relaxed state, everything sort of calms down and the heart variability starts to increase. So the more you can have that sort of higher heart rate variability, the more indication that you are getting the rest that you need. And a lot of us these days, unfortunately, are stressed. We're not sleeping enough. We're using our devices too much, and all of those actually have an impact on heart rate variability. We've got some fascinating projects with clinical partners and academic partnerships and customers as well around heart rate variability and stress. Some really, really interesting things are coming out of it.
So if you're constantly in this fight mode, in this stressed, amped up mode, that's obviously a bad thing then, yeah? And it's probably a bad thing if you're constantly in a sort of a low stress mode all the time, because you need to have a split of both, I suppose, yeah?
Ideally, you have a split. It's worse, obviously, if you're in a constant state of stress. And in fact, there's a statistic from Harvard that 2% of US GDP is written off of the US economy due to work-related stress.
Wow.
Think about the billions that is. I think that the first thing is recognizing when you're in, this sort of state, when recognizing that you're not sleeping enough, recognizing that you're stressed about something. It starts with the recognition in the first place, and things like the latest generation of wearables and what's coming as well give you some of this insight. But the key point of all of these things is it needs to be accurate, and we have seen with other technologies and a lot of existing technologies is the accuracy is not very good, and a lot of the wearable companies know this. And the generation of wearables today is much better than the generation of wearables a few years ago. And you may see this even in step count, which people sort of mostly associate with wearables. But there is much more capability and functionality being put into devices like those.
Yeah, sure.
They are effectively becoming medical devices.
Stress is obviously an enormous cause of heart cardiovascular disease then. Yeah. Is it the biggest cause, would you say, Adrian?
No, and there's not enough data to be able to back that up. It's been recognized formally that stress is linked to cardiovascular disease, but in terms of the magnitude of it, that information, that data is not here yet. And part of what our technology is doing is I suppose bridging that gap, creating the capability to understand this. But when a heart-related condition is diagnosed, in many aspects it can be fixed accordingly. If atrial fibrillation is diagnosed, there is drugs that can be taken. There's a relatively harmless procedure called a cardioversion that can take place. But again, the issue that we're seeing is that you can't fix that problem you can't see. So, people don't get ECGs unless they feel something's not right, or there's some event, or they're in a hospital for another reason. What we're trying to do with our technology is to get it out to everybody, and not just people with the most expensive wearables, the cheapest wearables. That sort of early indication of something going wrong can save your life. We did an event in London last year, and we had, I think, 30 people demo our technology, and 3 people had some form of arrhythmia. So that was 10% effectively of the people who tried out our technology. And we found something that, if they don't treat, will eventually lead to potentially a stroke, for example.
Oh my God. Wow. There's something stuck in my mind when we spoke before, Adrian. You told me about how the next wave of heart problems is not going to come from the places we think. So obviously alcohol abuse, drug abuse, that's obviously going to cause, heart issues. But there's also, on the other extreme, in terms of these extreme events and these ultra marathon runners and stuff like that, they're not doing their heart any favors either, are they? Isn't that what you told me?
The heart is a muscle, and it can be overworked. You need to know the extremes of your body and what it's capable of doing. And there's actually a term called athlete's heart. We're seeing, stories every so often, because they're famous people, of a footballer that has to stop playing football, or an NBA basketball player that's had an arrhythmia diagnosed, or things like that. So there are people who can have heart-related conditions, always have had them, and then there are people who can develop them for various different reasons. From a physiological point of view, there's genetic reasons and everything else. But also, you can effectively train too much and not look after yourself, and for all the various different reasons. So if you speak to some cardiologists, they will see people who have got damage to their heart based on the fact that they are extreme athletes, which is not very well known.
No, nobody knows about it. I mean, everyone assumes, they're really fit and healthy.
Yeah.
But I suppose it's about extremities, isn't it? It's about taking it too far.
Absolutely.
Do you think it comes back down to, Adrian, people in the same way that the crazy stressed businessman doesn't probably rest enough? It's the same with the athletes, is that they don't give their body enough downtime. Is that essentially, do you know what I mean? If people manage that split better, didn't overtrain, didn't overwork, we'd probably see an enormous reduction in cardiovascular disease. Do you think that's pretty much what we're talking about, isn't it? We
would certainly see a reduction. I mean, the majority of the people who are suffering from cardiovascular disease, lifestyle is a big aspect of that, and that's not, typically over extremes of exercise. It's all about balance. But what can happen is that the heart in itself, and the heart rate variability measurements and stress measurements, all can give indications. So to give you an example of this, we have a physiological stress algorithm, and so I can go out and do a lot of extreme exercise, and it'll show my heart rate and my heart rate zones, and it'll show my heart rate variability, and that's fine. But that's supposed to be a short burst of activity. Now, if I'm worried about something, I'm worried about my job or money or whatever it is, the heart reacts actually the same way. So you can imagine a 30-minute vigorous exercise versus 3 or 4 hours of ups and downs of high stress. It's still the same impact on the heart.
Yeah, sure.
So this is why it's really important to be aware of what's going on within your mind and your body, and how that's translating into measurements like ECG.
Yeah, sure. So look, I know you're commercially impartial, Adrian, but how good is the most recent generation of technology? How close to cutting edge is it in terms of monitoring heart rate variability, HRV?
I think we're seeing some certain brands now go down the route of clearance, for example, with the FDA, and then also going for the associated European clearances. So what that means for those devices is that they have to prove to an independent party that, whatever the features that they have, if they're diagnostic features, like, for example, around being able to diagnose atrial fibrillation as an arrhythmia, that an independent body and an independent organization is certifying that they have met the criteria to do that. So we've now seen some wearables actually achieve this capability, and more are coming. And this is now sets us on a journey where more sensors are being added to these types of wearable devices. And then if these devices are actually going to do a diagnosis or in real time or post-processing, they need the appropriate clearances to be able to do that. So if you compare a wearable 10 years ago to a wearable today, the wearable today is more accurate. And I can't stress enough that accuracy is absolutely key.
Sure.
A lot of clinicians are concerned about the capability of wearables related to accuracy. You don't want to be wearing a watch and it gives you a false positive that you have an arrhythmia in your heart.
No, of course.
Because what's the first thing you're going to do?
Do they even tell you, though? I mean, like...
They're starting to, yeah.
Because my Fitbit has never told me that, but maybe I just haven't got one. I don't know. But I don't know how he would tell me that, though.
No, the latest models allow you to do a scan of your ECG and it will give you a diagnosis.
Okay.
Or give you a recommendation. Now, they also tell you that to go to a clinician, because ultimately that is the person, the human is the one that actually makes the formal diagnosis, but as an early indicator. So that's why it's really important, because you don't want to have lots of people having false positives, getting really worried, and actually the issue doesn't exist.
We've spoke a lot about, cardiovascular disease and stuff like that. But what lifestyle impact do you think this technology will have? I think that even talking about traditional Swiss watches having some smart technology in them now, aren't they? What subtle changes do you think this will introduce into people's lifestyles? You know what I mean? Like, for example, sleep quality is something that I'm big on.
COVID has accelerated many different things. And if you take a step back, smartwatches, everybody associates step count with smartwatches. And actually, people have changed their lives just based on step count.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
If you think about that simple feature, that can make a huge difference, just trying to get those 10,000 steps a day. Now, there has been a lot of difference in accuracy between wearables on that step count. And that's a different story in itself. But
yeah, sure.
These other features are coming to wearables. And if you think about what's happened with COVID, we're now more familiar with doing a remote consultation with a doctor. And if you think about a remote consultation, the doctor can't really get any biological measurements from you. He or she can look at you and you can talk about how you feel, but there are no biological measurements that they can do. What these wearables are doing and other devices are creating the ability to get the accurate data that then can be fed to a doctor.
Yeah.
Which means we can avoid going to surgeries. We even potentially can avoid going to A&E for certain conditions. So what we're seeing is a movement where the typical consumer companies are becoming health companies, and health data is incredibly important. We see the medical companies wanting to be more engaged with consumers. So they're not patients. A person who has a medical implantable is still wearing a Fitbit or some other wearable. It's the same person. Remote patient monitoring is a huge, huge opportunity. You need the appropriate features and you need the appropriate accuracy.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll see a transformation in healthcare in the next 5 to 10 years where these types of technologies are accepted.
You mentioned a word there, plantable. Yeah. Can you elaborate on what you mean and how that is potentially going to become more prominent in the future?
Yeah, well, there's a few very large medical companies who offer various different types of implantable technology. So you may have heard of a pacemaker or a defibrillator or just an ICD device in itself. But these are devices that effectively sit under the skin around the heart, and they have different functions. These technologies exist today. There's a new generation of these technologies coming, but it effectively is allowing people to live longer.
Sure. Do you think that's potentially the future then? It doesn't have to be watches, does it? I mean, I don't know if Fitbit care about watches. They care about the data, don't they? So how do you see this space evolving? It's now regarded as the smartwatch space. Do you think we're going to move towards plantables in the future? Do you think that's the way it's going to go?
Well, implantable technologies are already here today, but they're more medical focused technologies. They're expensive to roll out. They're expensive to monitor. Not everybody in the population has the potential to get one, and then there's halters and patches and there's wearables. So we're definitely seeing the medical companies that are our customers doing some very, very interesting things in the next generation of medical technology. We're also seeing the consumer companies doing some very interesting things in their next generation of consumer technology. And both of those industries, which is incredible to watch, but both of those industries are now starting to merge. I'll give you an example of that. Abbott's a huge medical company.
Yeah.
Their CEO at the last consumer entertainment show in Las Vegas, their CEO talked about a wearable that Abbott are developing. So this is a medical company doing a wearable and talking about that at a consumer show.
They normally do things like stents and stuff like that, don't they? And
they also do implantable devices and a range of other types of devices as well.
Sure.
So so the traditional medical companies are now changing their product strategies and their roadmaps, as are the consumer companies. And it's not just wearables, and it's not just implantables. It's smart clothes, and it's vital signs monitoring in vehicles, and there's a lot of new sensory capability that's happening. And we're a software and an algorithm and analytics company, but as long as we stay close to what's going on from a sensory aspect and create the appropriate technology to be able to derive all the different biomarkers, we'll stay very relevant to our customers.
One of the biggest branding narratives on the wearable front, though, is to do with sports performance. Human performance generally. It doesn't have to be specifically competitive sport. How are you seeing that space play out? How are you seeing HRV technology help athletes achieve better performance?
A bit like what we spoke about earlier on. If I'm an athlete and I'm pushing myself in a training block for, say, 30 minutes, there's a certain amount of biomarkers that will exist while I'm doing that activity, whatever that is. But there's also the biomarkers that exist for the recovery after that. So you'll see and hear a lot about, football clubs and sports teams talking about recovery and how important it is, and whether a player is actually ready to go. And so now technology exists in terms of monitoring those players and seeing how they perform at the time, how they perform in their training, but also how they're recovering. Or are they even recovering? And by doing that sort of monitoring, you're almost removing, or at least reducing, the risk of, for example, burnout, injury, or just performance in the next training session or the next match.
Yeah.
So recovery time has become a huge area for professional sports people.
Yeah, sure.
And again, they're using things like heart rate variability to do that. The scoring from person to person, the trends, what are the analytics showing?
That's really interesting. I'm training for an event at the moment, and I'm always conscious of overtraining because you only got a certain amount of hours in the week, and I'm 41 now, so I don't want to, it's pretty easy to overtrain, you know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
And it definitely hinders your progress. I've been there before. So what's the best way to go about using HRV technology monitoring, to sort of spot patterns which mean, I need to slow down, I need to have a day's rest? Would you just be able to track that stuff through a normal Fitbit?
Well, I think accuracy is really important, and the different wearable companies have their own sort of strengths and weaknesses. I think for somebody like yourself who's trying to keep a close eye on this, it's the relative changes that you're looking for. So even if something is not massively accurate, relatively speaking, did you see a change when you did an event? So it's almost like keeping a diary. So if you go out for a few pints tonight, you will see a response, or you should see a response in the heart rate variability. So, even just seeing that relative change, if you go out for a run and you look at your heart rate variability measurements during that run and say, for example, it was, I don't know, you're typically around 30, 40 milliseconds. That's what you see in the heart rate variability measurement. How soon is it before you're back to 30, 40 milliseconds?
Yeah. It's funny. I had a drink last week and my heart rate variability plummeted that night. It's crazy, isn't it? You could just see it was just only on that, and then it was slowly making its way back to where it is then, because I haven't had a drink since. It's
if you think about it, you've just taken a poison.
Yeah.
You've taken a poison into your body, and your body is reacting in a way, and the heart is part of that. So the heart is doing something to help in the overall system as it reacts to this thing that's gone into your body. So we actually have some companies that are using this as an alternative way of testing their products outside of a lab and outside of blood tests. So it's incredible what you see in that signal, as I mentioned before.
But what I'm fascinated by is supposing we made HRV data, or we put it at the center point of our health and well-being, and we can see, I had a drink that night, and people can see how much things, typically change when you have a drink. I think people would probably stop drinking so much. I'm not saying people need to give up drinking, but it's just such an impact, isn't it? Or even if I suppose if you're ill, you can see it drop, or if you're overworked. I'm assuming your HRV data drops when you're stressed. It probably does when you've overtrained. But I mean, if we had that accurate data, it would change. It would change so much for people in terms of the way they manage their own health.
I think so. And actually, it's interesting to see. This is certainly happening in the US, but also in the UK here, where certain insurance companies are encouraging you to get a wearable, because they actually know that a person who will wear a wearable will start to hopefully pay attention to step count, pay attention maybe to the other biomarkers. And as more and more data comes through and more studies are done, we'll actually see how keeping an eye on this sort of stuff keeps you away from the doctor and keeps you away from the hospital. Everything in life is about balance. What these wearables are effectively doing is they're responding to your lifestyle. And yes, the accuracy could be better, and that's part of our value proposition and what we bring to this. So we bring the accuracy and the features, but these things are rolling out, and they're rolling out at scale. And I think people will pay attention to them. I mean, people are paying attention to step count if that's important to them.
Yeah,
people will start to pay much more attention to these types of markers as well.
I always say, if you're looking to lose weight and get a bit healthier or whatever it is, anything to do with well-being, I recommend people get a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or whatever, just or Garmin. Just basically get conscious of how much you're moving, and it just helps so many things, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's some incredible statistics of just a walk every day, how much it increases life expectancy.
So your technology is in most of the main market wearables then, Adrian, yeah? You're not a direct-to-consumer business. You're a B2B company, yeah?
Yes, yeah. We licensed other technology companies, and we're behind the scenes. Sometimes use the term Intel inside, but we're behind the scenes of other people's technology, yeah. And that technology has been rolling out and is rolling out in with more customers.
Wanted to move back to, you're a technologist, you've set up a technology firm. So I wanted to ask you, outside maybe of the wearable space, what are you most excited about in the world right now in terms of technology innovation?
I think we're seeing some major changes starting to happen in the capability to acquire data and obviously analyze data. So, some of the machine learning capabilities that are existing. We're exposed to a lot of new sensor technologies that are coming, which enable these wearables, but they enable smart clothing and other types of devices. So for me, the thing that I'm most excited about is actually in the field that we're working in, which is, better sensor capability, better algorithms and analytics, and the prediction of disease and mortality. And there's a lot of really interesting companies like ourselves in this space. There's a lot of interesting partnerships and collaborations starting to happen. We're partnered with a few key technology companies ourselves, and how we're all creating the capability to try and fight what's going on in, for example, cardiovascular disease. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, data analytics is just getting so we'd essentially getting to the point where we can predict the future, and it's quite exciting, isn't it?
It's exciting and it's scary, but I mean, with anything used the wrong way or for the wrong reason, it can be quite concerning. So I said it before a couple of times, but our focus in our technology is not to replace the human. We're not replacing the clinician. We're not replacing the cardiologist. And it's funny, you do see people making these claims about, their machine learning algorithm now can replace a human. And, we don't do that. What we're doing with our technology is helping the people who use it, like consumers, but also the clinicians from a more medical point of view in terms of, helping them do their job faster and easier.
Yeah. Elon Musk said before that, I think someone asked him, are we becoming cyborgs, with things like implantables or whatever? And he said, we're already cyborgs because we've all got an external brain, i.e. the phone, and we've got a smartwatch, and we all essentially interact with technology to answer questions, to give presentations, to communicate. We're already cyborgs, apparently, so we may as well carry on with it, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. We tend to... we tend to sort of sleepwalk into technology evolutions.
Yeah.
Just to your point,
without even realizing it.
Without even realizing it. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. So, Adrian, you're a busy chap. You co-founded a very successful high growth business. First of all, I wanted to ask you, how is that going? You've scaled a lot in the last couple of months. Talk us through where you're at. What's the sort of investment runway? How is it looking? What does the future look like for Be Secure?
Yeah, we've moved from a startup to effectively a scale up, and the company has doubled in size in the last 12 months. We have been licensing our technology to consumer brands, some you'd be well aware of. But this year we also entered the medical market, which is obviously, as I talked about before, it's a very traditional market with traditional technologies, and as I mentioned, the consumer and medical is now starting to come together. So we're playing in both and enabling both of those major markets. So in terms of the company itself, we completed a Series A about a year and a half ago. We're on another growth raise. We have 72 people. Most of those people are scientists and engineers, and we're continuing to provide innovation to other technology companies, and there's a big demand for it. So we'll continue on our journey, probably look to complete another round of investment over the next few months, which will enable us to grow further and serve the commercial demand for what we're doing.
Yeah, sure. So look, lots going on. We've talked about stress. You're obviously conscious. You've got more data than the average human in terms of your own health and well-being. How do you stay sane, and how do you ensure that you've got balance in your life?
It's something you mentioned you're in your 40s now. I'm in my 40s as well. I think it's paying attention and having discipline and knowing when you need to switch off or try to switch off. So I think I've become a lot better in more recent years of just recognizing when I need that downtime.
Yeah.
When I need to shut off the notifications and the alerts and everything else.
They're a killer, aren't they? Those notifications. They've put you straight back into work mode. And immediately it takes you an hour to recover from it sometimes. Yeah. It's just a subtle message, boom. It's crazy.
When your email, when it just comes up on the screen, it just to show you that an email's arrived.
Yeah, sure.
I don't have that.
No.
Shut that down.
Well, I shut down on the weekends for sure.
Yeah, and things like don't look at a device past a certain hour and stuff like that. So those are things I've had to learn. And I actually, to your point earlier on, it was actually by monitoring my own vital signs and seeing the impact of work on the vital signs.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. That allowed me to go, okay, I know that this is happening, and I know that I'm not sleeping, and I know that I'm getting this sort of stress response and everything else. So I've made changes on the basis of that and on the back of that.
Good stuff. Absolutely. So how do you manage to? Obviously, you've grown. You're trying to build a culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, to a sort of a double question, if you like, double faceted question. How has your culture changed as a result of lockdown? And what do you essentially do to sort of ensure that your team have balance in their lives and that you get the best out of your team?
Myself and the other co-founders, probably have 20 years each in terms of experience, and that's working in different companies and seeing different cultures and having different bosses and managing teams and everything else. And what we were very open about was, can we take all the good things that we've experienced and run a company that way? And that starts with knowing that and accepting that, there is no company without the people, and understanding that, we have to get the right people with the right attitude, which is really, really important. I think attitude is totally underrated, into the company and making sure that they have everything they need. But we operate on a trust basis. So every person within the company we trust to do their job. They've got their own ownership. They feel that they're contributing to something very important. And I think that in itself has sort of driven a culture. And as we went into COVID, we were a very collaborative team, have lots of fun, lots of open communication, but we work really, really hard. And as COVID happened, we already were a very flexible organization. So it was okay, everybody go home. But obviously a quick chat across an office that would be 1 minute is now a 15-minute Zoom call. Or a half an hour. And so what we noticed was that our culture, not being able to get together was affected a little bit, that collaboration.
Yeah.
But we did things like, we'd all jump on and have quizzes together, and we'd have a few drinks, and, banter is a word in Northern Ireland, but, we have a lot of banter within our company between each other. And not a very rigid structure per se. So we try to do what we could to keep that going. And now that things are opening up again, we try to get people together, but still give people that flexibility, because everybody's got their own personal situation. So
Sure.
we have a hybrid sort of approach, but we really do promote, people getting together, teams mixing it up with each other, and the open communication. I think it's hugely important.
Yeah, for sure. What about productivity? What's your number one piece of productivity advice?
Actually, it comes down to discipline again. So it's very easy to get sidelined and sidetracked because of a meeting here and a notification there and an opinion here and there. So I think it's having that discipline, and breaking down what we're trying to achieve, and communicating that clearly. There's an approach within technology called systems engineering, for example.
Yeah.
And that's where you break down what you're trying to achieve, what you must achieve, what you could achieve, everything else. And you really, really break that down and make sure that everybody's clear on it, and sort of operate on those sort of focus areas. So we try to take that systems engineering approach to any sort of task or activity that we do. We make sure that we know who needs to work on it, how long they're going to take. But it's not a micromanagement thing, if that makes sense.
No, of course.
It's more of a
building a roadmap, essentially.
Building a roadmap and just knowing what we need to do and having the right people on it.
Yeah.
And communication through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. If you could have a coffee with anyone in the world, 15-minute coffee meeting, okay? Who would it be?
Oh, would it be my wife? I have to say that first.
Who's the second one you'd have?
The second one, probably a bit of a cliche, but I think, somebody like Nelson Mandela, who, if you think about all the problems that people say they have or they think that they have, if you think about, his life.
Yeah, sure.
If you think about, resilience and how, he went through what he did, came out the other end, and then obviously made a massive difference and impact. Just sitting down and just sort of hearing directly from him about that, and how he was able to be in those moments and get through it and cope.
Yeah, sure. And still be true to his cause when he left prison as well.
Absolutely.
And then obviously how his fortunes turned around. That's a brilliant answer. No, I love that. Yeah. Here's my favorite one, Adrian. What advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
Ooh. Well, I could, there's many things I would say, but I can't really say on a podcast. I would actually say take more risks, even with Be Secure. Even when I was in my sort of early 20s, I was a bit risk averse. We didn't come from a wealthy family or anything like that, so it was really important for me to get my education, get a good job and a stable job and all those things.
Yeah.
So the first place I didn't go was, I'm going to start my own company and everything else. And later on in life, when I had the support network behind me, I was able to sort of make that decision to try something a little bit riskier and, go on the journey with Be Secure, which was, going from a very stable corporate job into a startup is not an easy leap. When you've got bills to pay and kids and everything else, but I would say to my 21-year-old self, it's okay to fail. It's okay to take risks. And I realize now that, there is no learning without making mistakes. You got to make mistakes to actually learn. Try something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And what's the worst going to happen? You're going to fail and you're going to learn from it and you move on. So that's the sort of chat I would have to that younger version of myself, because I think I was a bit conservative in some decisions that I made.
Yeah,
certain
sure.
aspects, yeah.
In Britain, I suppose, it feels like sometimes that we don't want to stand out too much. We don't want to take too many risks. We don't want to go against the grain of what's normal. I mean, in America, they seem to be a lot better at it, don't they? It's kind of like, it's almost a medal of honor if they've got 3 failed startups behind them.
Oh, yeah.
But you can guarantee that because of the 3 failed startups, number 4 is probably going to work, We
tend to associate the founders of companies as the guys we know, the young, now billionaires. And actually, if you look at the average age of the people who are starting companies at the moment, they tend to be middle-aged, so they tend to be 40 plus. And I think it's because those people come to a conclusion that they can take a risk now, and it's okay to take a risk. But if you'd actually go back and push this in schools, about how STEM subjects, for example, the engineering and the maths and everything else can allow you to create some very, very special things, and it's okay, and you should try. And if we put an infrastructure in place to promote people to start new businesses with ideas and all the infrastructure that's behind that, it'd probably be revolutionary for the economy in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the education system definitely needs to modernize. We need to give children financial training, in terms of just basic money management, what a balance sheet looks like, and get them to understand the risk that they take on when they do set up an enterprise. And I think we'd have so many more people leaving school and setting up small businesses because it's such an incredible learning curve for them, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I mean, are we teaching kids even how to manage money? There's a lot of things that you learn in life that you don't get in school, but you could very easily get in school. And I think it should really start there. I'm really proud of our team. We do a lot of visits into schools locally here, and we bring our technology in there, and we allow children to play with some of the devices that we have, and they see their heartbeats, and we have a bit of fun with them and everything else. But it's really trying to promote kids to think about engineering and science, and especially young girls as well, which are totally underrepresented typically in engineering and science. So we try to do a lot of work in those areas to really just promote that love of science and engineering, it's not sitting in a corner just doing maths. There's huge exciting things that people can be working on, but you don't get that typically in school. So that's the sort of area we're trying to push.
Brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Well, look, really enjoyed chatting to you, Adrian. As you know, I love this space and I could chat to you all day, but I think we've covered some really important areas here, and hopefully it'll inspire somebody to buy a wearable and get more on top of their health data, because I think it changes people's lives, Where can people find you and Be Secure? I know you got a podcast you set up recently. Where can people find out more about this?
Well, our website's www.be-secure.com, and we have various different Twitter feeds and LinkedIn profiles. We're not a company that deals directly with the public. We typically deal with other technology companies.
Well, look, I expect you guys to grow massively. I think this is a really exciting space. But look, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. It's been a privilege. Okay, cheers, Adrian.
Always good to speak to you, Gareth. All the best.
So much to get your head around there. Adrian is such an easy guy to talk to. We could have gone on for ages. I did have a bit of a sobering moment where I came to the realization that I'm constantly in this stressed fight or flight state. But apart from that, I really enjoyed the conversation. What stood out for me, or at least something that I'd like to draw attention to, is the need, which I think is a really important message, is the need to seek downtime and balance, not only for yourself, but in the context of leadership and growing a business. It was really interesting to hear how Adrian ensures that his team have the required amount of balance in their lives, and how Be Secure have essentially built a culture around this point. He also talks about authenticity and authentic leadership, and elaborates on that as well, leading with honesty and integrity, which I think is so important and something which is a reoccurring theme on this podcast. So it was good to hear that. Thank you for tuning in. I really hope you took some value from this conversation and that you enjoyed the interview. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for downloading this episode. We really love doing this show and are absolutely humbled by all of the incredible people who download and listen, plus the incredible guests who take the time to come on and share their secrets and experiences with our listeners. Please can I ask that you take a couple of seconds to subscribe or follow the show. This small action means a lot to us and helps us greatly. Thank you. As you quite possibly have heard me mentioning in the past, we record the mass majority of our episodes at an amazing studio facility here in Cardiff at Tramshed Tech. Tramshed Tech is a collaborative community of entrepreneurs and scaling businesses geared towards supporting growth in tech, digital and creative industries across an ever-increasing collection of locations and partner locations, UK-wide and internationally. It really is the perfect place for your business to start up, scale up, accelerate, or innovate. Head over to tramshedtech.co.uk or just search Tramshed Tech on your favorite social media platform.